Joining me to discuss this is Vaibhav Kakkar. He's a partner at Luthra Luthra. Good evening, Vaibhav. You know, it's done. Finance Minister has announced that the FIPB is going to be abolished. We understand that maybe in 6 to 8 weeks from now, a cabinet note could be prepared on the same. The RBI is working, we understand, on a standard operating procedure form that's going to be with all the ministries. What I want to first get a sense from is how bold a reform is this, or is India Inc., is a law firm fraternity reading it as a regressive step because you're doing away with a single window mechanism?
Absolutely, Nayantara. If one was to look at the trend within the government and, the whole mantra of maximum governance and minimum government, everywhere they've actually moved towards a single window clearance mechanism. And here we had a single window clearance which has been around for a while, which is now being completely done away with. On the face of it, it sounds like a bold reform that FIPB is going to be disbanded altogether. But if you see the FDI policy, there are about 18 activities which are continue to be under the approval route. Now, I don't believe so, and nor is the sense that we get when we hear the minister's speech in the parliament and outside, that the intent is to liberalize all of these 18 sectors. So sensitive sectors such as print media, INB, defense, civil aviation, they will continue to get supervised by the regulators in terms of foreign investment proposals. So if the policy does not get liberalized and the FIPB gets disbanded, the real concern and the worry that the investor community has is that then they will be dealing with the relevant sectoral agencies, which could create a whole lot of complications in terms of just multiplicity of authorities interpreting the same set of rules differently. And that has happened before.
No, but Vaibhav, what I want to ask you is, and that's exactly the point I'm trying to raise. For example, let's take it by a few sectors. For example, whether it is a news channel or whether it is telecom, for example, you need to go to more than one ministry for an approval. That's the point you were trying to raise. So if you do away with the FIPB and the single window mechanism, then what does it mean? That are you all going to have to keep going back to ministry by ministry to figure out whether they are all on board?
So we've been given to understand that the government is still contemplating as to what the path forward should be. I think the right path would be that if this is to be a bold reform, then really, first of all, the policy needs to be liberalized even further. And whatever those sectors that are there under the approval route, and some of them are needlessly there, have to be completely done away with. It then becomes a question of how you administer these rules. Let me give you a couple of examples. In the past, you've had instances where the sector-related government authorities have given strange interpretations to the policy. And that's the time when the FIPB has stepped in. Classic example is Air Asia, where if you remember, the Civil Aviation Ministry had interpreted the FDI rules to state that no fresh foreign investment can come into a new airline. It can only come into an existing airline. And the FIPB and the DIPP had to step in to clarify that that is not the intent. So if now the FIPB is going to be done away with and you don't see liberalizations in the policy, which means that you will need to continue to get approval from somebody within the government, then ideally, Nayantara, there has to be some nodal agency which will have to continue shepherding all these other ministries, because at the end of the day...
So who should that nodal agency be? What should be that nodal agency? Should it finally be the RBI, for example? Because, the RBI is going to have the final say. You're talking about foreign inflows over here. So should it be the RBI? Should it be the DIPP? And while you all may be wary of the FIPB being done away with, has it been functioning the way you would have wanted it to function? Is there really everybody on the same page? For example, if I were to look at Apple's case, I understand it's not before the FIPB, but there is no convergence of opinion when you talk about the Commerce Ministry, the Telecom Ministry, the Finance Ministry.
So, Nayantara, sure, there have been experiences where, certain nodal agencies within the government have also not really facilitated foreign investment. But that does not do away with all the good work that FIPB has done in the past. As I mentioned, you see the trend all over the government. The idea is to move towards a single window clearance system. We are moving away from that. And if that is happening, that does bring some level of nervousness in the investor community. The government needs to work out what their path forward should be. If you were to ask me who that nodal agency should be, to my mind, certainly the authors of the policy, which is the DIPP in the Ministry of Commerce, surely should be in the driving seat and be really shepherding these other nodal around, because there are a number of issues that will be relevant for this purpose, Nayantara. One would be what happens in sectors which are under the automatic route, but there are certain sector-related conditions which an investor may look at seeking dispensation. Now, who do you go for that to? Similarly, if there are interpretational issues, as happened in the case of AirAsia, who do you go to? I think those sorts of issues need to be crystallized. There also needs to be a fixed time frame given to these nodal agencies, that what happens if an application has been pending with, say, Ministry of Civil Aviation or Ministry of Information Broadcasting for 90 days, then there has to be a concept of deemed approval, which has to be written in the policy so as to actually really put pressure on the relevant nodal agencies.
That's quite ambitious.
To work quicker.
Deemed approval,
So
that's very ambitious. I don't think the
one would
RBI is going to work with deemed approval, Vaibhav. Ambitious.
Nayantara, the whole idea is that if you have to make ease of doing business in India, you look at how the FIPB framework used to work. One would know whenever one was lodging an FIPB application, one had a good sense of a 10 to 12 week window that one was really looking at. Sure, in practice, in the past, we may have had instances where applications may have taken longer for processing, and that could have been because certain nodal agencies may have taken much longer in coming back. But the real challenge would now be that if you don't have a centralized setup to really be able to push the relevant nodal ministries to look at the applications in a speedy manner, then how else do you build the pressure? And if you are looking at easing business in India for investors, this has to go hand in hand. So again, I would sort of re-emphasize that, to my mind, the decision to move away from single window clearance system isn't exactly what, from an investor standpoint, seems like a great move, unless you liberalize all of those sectors, which I don't think is going to happen. And once you accept that decision, then if that be the case, it would be important to come up with a uniform set of guidelines as to how those relevant nodal ministries will look at these applications. There has to be capacity building because some of these officials which handle the relevant nodal ministries, for instance, a gentleman in Department of Pharma would not be familiar with the finer nuances of how the rules of foreign investment work. So there needs to be capacity building at relevant nodal ministries. There also needs to be a defined time frame within which these applications need to be processed, and also as to what are the levels of documents that they need to look into so that needlessly complications don't arise. Just to give you an example, Department of Revenue a few years back, for any investment proposal that would come from Mauritius, Cyprus, or any other tax favorable jurisdiction, used to raise objections for every particular proposal. And it was the wisdom of the FIPB and the collective body that would always overrule those objections. Now imagine a situation where I file an application with a nodal ministry and they invite comments from different ministries and then start taking into account all those concerns without looking in the overarching framework that, yes, there is a tax treaty. So somebody needs to monitor that there is a uniform behavioral pattern. It should not happen that one nodal ministry is looking at the application differently
I get your point.
and the other ministry is looking at it differently. That is what worries all of us.
That's right. You could become a victim of interpretation on file notings. Vaibhav Kakkar, we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to wrap it at that.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.